So Joyce stops Christian Hammer in the 4th round. However, before I get to that, just a little bit of housekeeping. As of yesterday, the channel broke 800 subscribers, currently sitting at 803 at the time of recording this video. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of you guys who are subscribed, who watch my videos and comment underneath them. It's greatly appreciated, your support and you contributing to me growing this channel. Honestly, I'm so grateful. And of course, alongside that, I have a lot of immense gratitude towards my brothers in the boxing brotherhood, Hatman, G-Man, Chris Andre, Boxing on the Edge. You know, it's great to have these guys alongside me. And then, of course, they've played a big role in me growing my channel. So yeah, currently 803 subscribers. Naturally, the next landmark is 1,000. So if you guys can help me out and maybe share the channel and any videos you like, pass them on to your friends. If you are subscribed and you haven't hit the notification bell, if you could do that, it helps massively because my videos might not always reach you, even if you are subscribed. So all this goes a long way in helping me out, and let's grow this channel. Let's continue to have a good, wholesome, objective platform for boxing discussion and continue to appreciate this sport that we love so much. Anyway, moving on. As I said, Joyce stops Christian Hammer in the 4th round, actually dropping him 4 times in the process. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the fight, round by round, because it was only 4 rounds. It's on YouTube, you can see it, and of course, you've probably already seen it as it is. But this was exactly the kind of fight that was expected, I feel. Joyce was looking to press the action, looking to come forward behind a consistent output and pressure, and Christian Hammer being the wily veteran, should I say. He was really looking to survive, but in the process he was trying to set up some sneaky right hands and deter Joyce and keep him off, and maybe hope to catch lightning in a bottle and do some damage, which of course didn't happen. That didn't materialize. Many people seem to be disappointed with Joyce's performance. That seems to be the kind of general feel, that people have seen it and they've had a chance to reflect and review on it. So many people are actually kind of going with this tagline that Joyce is now an accident waiting to happen. And a lot of this seems to stem from the fact that Joyce, he shipped a few clean right hands from Christian Hammer. Now, I'm going to play devil's advocate, just being objective and describing what I see. And, people have this view now that Joyce is no good. He took a few clean right hands, even though he got the stoppage early. But, playing devil's advocate, as I say, Joyce hasn't fought in a year. The last time he fought was Carlos Takam, and that was the 24th of July last year. I believe it was late July last year. And Christian Hammer in his own right, at the bare minimum, he's an experienced kind of gatekeeper type fighter. He's got bags of experience. And additionally, Joyce, I think you have to look at the context of how this fight came about. Joyce was lined up to fight Parker. It seemed like it was, all systems go for that fight. And of course it fell through. So maybe in the wake of it falling through, Joyce couldn't get up for this Hammer fight. Who knows? But I do understand why people are disappointed by Joyce, because just to give you my opinion, Joyce has actually failed to impress me for a little while now. And I'm actually one of the few people who think that Joyce on his day is a problem for a lot of fighters in the division. If I'd want to explore potentially why this performance was a little bit flat, I don't think it was that bad a performance, but I can understand why people do, because there were some kind of rookie errors that Joyce was making. Primarily the one that I spotted was the Joyce, he seemed to be rushing a little bit. Now, he wasn't going balls to the wall rushing, but he just lacked a little bit of patience, and he seemed to be attempting to commit to combinations without really taking his time. But also when he'd actually looked to throw those punches, those combination punches, he seemed to be failing to come off the centre line, especially with the right hand. Even he'd look to just lead with a basic 1-2, but he'd be quite heavy on the front foot as he was throwing the jab, and he'd look to follow up with the right hand, and he just wasn't coming off. He wasn't a moving target, and he's already a massive guy, so it necessitates a bit more movement. And Joe Joyce can move. You know, Chris spoke about this in his post-fight video, how Joyce, even though he's got slow hands, he's got fast feet, and that's one thing that's always puzzled me. Joe Joyce, I don't think his footwork is as bad as people make out, because a lot of people make out as if Joe Joyce has the worst footwork in the division, and I seriously disagree. He can look a little bit ungainly at times. I feel like Joe Joyce, he has maybe some mental lapses where he can be out of position. He can maybe look a little bit off balance, but when he's in his construct, as Chris likes to say, I think he's quite sturdy and he's quite well balanced, you know, and he moves well for someone of his size and dimensions. But it is quite a strange combination of having fast feet and slow hands. Usually it's the other way around. We have fighters who have blistering hand speed when they're stationary, but their feet are just like they're in cement blocks. Joyce isn't like that. Joyce actually has quite good footwork and quite, I don't want to say fluid, but it's not as rough as you'd expect someone of his size to be. Anyway, Joyce was getting caught. He just seemed to rush his work, wasn't very diligent in his defensive responsibility and setting up his shots. However, towards the second half of the 4 rounds, if you want to say that, Joyce seemed to up the activity of his lead hand and take his time a bit more. And this is where we start to see those issues less. And I feel that's really what he needed. He just needed to take his time. He just needed to be a bit more measured, because Christian Hammer, he is experienced and he knows how to throw a shot. So if you back him up, he's going to throw that shot, and if he lands, he lands. Joe Joyce, however, does have that granite chin, and many people are asking the question, how long can he trade on that, which is perfectly valid. You have these guys and they have great punch resistance and powers of recovery, and they have an amazing ability to just tank damage. You know, they can just absorb it and show no real ill effect. But you do wonder in the back of your mind, how long can this guy do this? Especially someone like Joe Joyce, who he's 36. You know, he's older than all the champions and the top guys. You have AJ, who's early 30s, Tyson Fury early 30s. I think Deontay Wilder's like 2 years younger than Joyce. Maybe the same with Alexander Usyk. So Joyce is leading the pack in terms of age. But you do wonder, how much punishment can he take? He absorbs it well, but for how long? Joe Joyce is a fighter. I've often said that Joe Joyce is at his best when he gets moving. And a good example of this, in my opinion, is his career best performance. Seems to be a bit of a polarizing performance, but against Jennings. Because there were rounds in that fight where Joyce was just in perpetual motion, and his offense just, you know, not necessarily the speed, but the fluidity of his punches, especially in combination and selection of shots, was brilliant in my opinion. This once again in the context of him and the dimensions he has, because Joe Joyce is a naturally big man. Got something like 4 times or 5 times the normal bone density of a human male, which is, I don't know if that's true, but many people have said it, and it's crazy. But Joe Joyce is a naturally big man. But also in that fight, when he's moving and he's in this rhythm, he has surprisingly good defense as well. He's able to use his feet to move around the ring and keep distance, but he can slip off, especially towards the back foot, and he can be deceptively difficult to hit, at least for particular fighters with particular skill sets. But just to get a bit scientific for a moment, inertia seems to play a big part in how Joe Joyce performs. And for those who don't know, inertia basically describes an object's resistance to changes in velocity. So to simplify it with an example, if you have a box that has a certain mass, a certain weight, assume that gravity is acting upon that mass, It requires, there's a certain resistance to move it from a stationary position, it's static, to get it into motion. The higher the inertia, the harder it's going to be to change its state of motion. But however, that same box, once it gets moving, there's also going to be inertia to stop it and return it to a stationary position. So it's these changes in velocity. The greater the inertia, the more resistance there is to a change in velocity. And so, without complicating it anymore, applying this to Joe Joyce, when he's his least active and least dynamic, typically in the beginning of a fight, like many fighters, he's very easy to hit, can look quite cumbersome and poor because he's slow. However, when he gets moving, he's nearly impossible to stop. And I know that sounds intuitive. It sounds like, okay, that's just what you need to apply to every fighter. As long as they're moving, as long as they've got their rhythm, they're going to be successful. And yeah, I understand that. However, there are some fighters who, they don't necessarily need to be in a rhythm. I guess you'd say that they're fighters who fight well off of broken rhythms and kind of herky-jerky, to use an unprofessional term. There are certain fighters and they can pick and poke and just land a shot to steal a round. Whereas Joe Joyce, he's not really like that. He really has to get going. But once he does, he is a juggernaut, and it's a very fitting name because once he gets into his rhythm, he has so much motion that he can just carry through an entire round, and it's like the momentum just carries him, and he doesn't gas out. In the momentum just picks up and it snowballs, and he's like a juggernaut. He's unstoppable. So he's a very unique style, and in that regard, and I think I've never had much confidence in Joe Joyce becoming a champion, because the division is super stacked. And I think the guys at the top, if you want to say Joshua, Wilder, Usyk and Fury, I think stylistically they're not the greatest matchups for Joe Joyce. If I had to pick one of those guys who I feel has the greatest chance of losing to Joe Joyce, I think it'd be Joshua. Mostly from a familiarity perspective, because of course they've sparred countless rounds. However, that's a double-edged sword, because of course Joyce may have familiarity with Joshua, but then it works both ways because they've been in the ring with each other many times before. So I'm not sure where Joe Joyce goes next, but I still want to see him in good fights, because I find his style quite entertaining. Because yeah, it's a little bit rough around the edges and crude, but I think he has a lot to offer. And as I say, when he gets going, this man is hard to stop, let alone beat. So that's just my impression of Joe Joyce's performance, what I think he can do better, but also what I think he does quite well, in the fact that once he gets going, he's deceptively hard to hit, and he has a great varied offense that's very consistent. So yeah, that's just my thoughts and impressions of this fight. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Once again, thanks for 800 subscribers. Let's get it to 1,000. Yeah, just leave your feedback down below, and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll catch you in the next video.